Hello and welcome to Three Books with Dui. I am your host, Duilemi Awolalu, and my guest for this episode is Nneoma. Nneoma is the curator of Empower 46, an online newsletter for African women by African women. She is also a political science graduate from Virginia Tech and a financial analyst on Wall Street. I would like to apologize for the audio quality of this episode due to some unforeseen technical challenges. The subsequent episodes will definitely be better. Please bear with us. Thank you. Hey Nneoma, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Very well. How have you been? How was your week and your weekend?
It's been great. Spent my time doing absolutely nothing, which is the best. Which is the best way to spend your time on a weekend if you're lucky. So I've had a great weekend. Thank you for asking.
Okay. So you said you curate for Empower 46 or you curate Empower 46 a newsletter. So can you tell us what it is exactly?
Right. So basically it's like you said, a newsletter. It's on a monthly schedule right now. And
Okay.
I take a look at all the news, distill those that are focused on African women, from
Okay.
entertainment, politics, business, all that good stuff, and curate it within the sections of the newsletter. So there's a section that's more or less like current affairs, and there's a section that's business, and a section that's like core research on like policies, things like that.
Oh, like how
So
many page?
it's not very long, and I realize how long it sounds when I say it that way. No, it's like, so
Because
for
it
the
seems
current
like a
affairs,
lot. Seems like
so
a
for the
lot.
current affairs, right, it's like 4 or 5 bullet stories. I
Yeah.
summarize the gist of the text, give like there's always like a read more section that just has the quotes of something interesting in the text and then a link. So may link you to like BBC Africa, Premium Times, Nigeria, Namibian Times, wherever the news is originating from. And then a different section is more like Cape to Cape, and that's more like the fun things. Somebody won an award. Tiwa Savage released a new album.
Yeah.
There's been something interesting going on in Morocco with the Fisher women there, stuff like
Okay,
that.
so people is centered around African women.
It's only African women, and
Yeah,
only
fair enough.
women, mostly because we're not that featured in media, even when it's African oriented media. So it's just a little corner of the world, which is fun.
It reminds me of one newsletter. I don't know if it's a newsletter or just a monthly or weekly magazine from Deeper Life, like when I was way young.
Did
Just
you say
reminded me
from
of
deeper
that.
life?
From Deeper Life. Everything women, like from Christian women and all that stuff,
I
like
love
different
that.
stories.
That's
Yeah.
hilarious.
I don't
Well,
know if you know, it was quite popular back in the day.
no,
I
it doesn't
can't
ring a
remember the name.
bell, but
I can't remember the name. It was
I
very popular.
suppose,
Maybe you probably have seen it.
yeah, I suppose nothing is new under the sun, right? I love that. I'm going to
Yeah.
look into that. I wonder what.
Check it, like from Deeper Life. One, I think Mirror Women or something. It was very popular.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
that's cool. I'm happy to hear that. I love women-oriented things. I do. I really do.
All right. So, what are your 3 books?
My 3 books. So the first one is Woman at Point Zero, which is
Okay.
by an Egyptian author, Nawal El Saadawi.
Okay.
My second book is Ijeawele, or A Feminist Manifesto in 15 Suggestions, which is Chimamanda's sort of latest, like, it's like a chapbook, manifesto kind of book.
Is that latest?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, now that you've asked me that, now I'm not sure, but I think it is. I think it's her most recent book.
Okay.
And then my final book is The Shadow of Imana, which is by an Ivorian writer, Veronique Tadjo, and it's a book that talks about the Rwandan genocide. It's a really interesting and traumatic book, but it's a really fascinating book as well.
Okay. So do you want us to go start like with the way you started listing the books, that order, the first one?
Sure.
Okay.
Anyway,
So
that's best for you.
all right, you. The first one. The first one you mentioned what's the name again?
Woman at Point Zero.
Woman at Point Zero. So can you tell us a bit? Because to be honest, I did not read the book at all.
I'm so
I'm not even going to
offended.
lie. I'm sorry.
You have offended me.
No, I told you I've been really, really busy. I kept procrastinating now.
No excuses, do you?
So
Number
I have no
mentality, no
clue.
excuses.
That is why you're here. Tell me why you like it so much and why you should read the book another time. So
Okay. I will do you this favor because I'm on your podcast. Okay.
okay.
So Woman at Point Zero is a very fascinating kind of, I want to stay away from the word bland, but it's the word that's coming to mind. So it's so Nawal El Saadawi, she was like a Egyptian, like I said, she was a writer, like an activist as well. And
Okay.
she went to this prison, it's like it was a prison in Cairo. And she was writing about she was trying to write about the women there. And the warden introduces her or tells her about this particular woman who has been sentenced to death and is about to be executed. And now she decides she wants to write about this woman. And I think at the time she was some kind of like psychologist or, some kind of a therapist kind of person. Somebody who it was in her best interest to also write about the woman, right? So she, like, Nawal El Saadawi writes as this therapist or this psychiatrist and tries to gain an audience with the woman, but the woman is just like not interested in talking to her. Long story short, the woman eventually decides, listen, I'm going to die. I'll talk to you about my story. And the woman narrates this story, which is the text of the book, narrates this story about how she was more or less abused and molested by every man that she's ever come across, literally from her father all the way to the man that she eventually killed, and then the sequence of events that led from her to killing that man to ending up on death row. Yeah. So it's a really interesting book in that it talks about like her particular experiences with men, which were all negative, which I think is quite rare to not have a single positive interaction with a man. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's also a narrative that a lot of women have, to be frank. Like it talks about let me tell you her story, I guess. She was born like in a peasant family in a rural area. Her father was abusive, kind of never let them have anything. And then she was married off to some older guy who was also an abuser and was beating her. And she just decided, okay, I'm not going to keep getting beaten by this old guy. And she runs off. She becomes a prostitute. And she's a prostitute, meets a lot of men, especially meets this one guy that's particularly abusive. She runs off, decides she doesn't want to be a prostitute anymore. She wants to start working in like some kind of a factory or something. So she starts working in the factory and falls in love with this guy who's a revolutionary who is treating her well. So she's like, finally, a great guy. I can, lay down my arms and, feel comfortable in love.
Sorry, but like she seems like a romantic. Like she just can't.
You know what's funny? For most of the book, she really isn't. She has this very bland view of men, in that men only want to control me as a woman, right? This very like bland, straightforward clarity. And she talks about it from what she calls, or what she considers like a prostitute's perspective. Like she kind of says like, one thing, there's a quote that she says, I know that my profession, the profession being prostitution, right? I know that my profession was invented by men, and that men are in control of both our worlds, the one on earth and the one in heaven. That men force women to sell their bodies at a price, and that the lowest paid body is that of a wife. All women are prostitutes of one kind or another. So it's a very harsh sentiments, both of men and of women, but that she uses that kind of bland, simple. It's not a very poetic book. So she's not a romantic at all, but I think she just falls for this guy because he seems to be speaking truth to power, and seems to be like the one man in the world that realizes the evil that men can do, kind of, except he ends up marrying someone else without telling her. And she realizes that she was just another tool in his toolbox. So anyway, long story short, because I feel like I've been talking for so long trying to explain the story.
No. It's actually quite intriguing. It's actually really intriguing, and I'm seeing some things that I want to lay out. So, but just finish on, like, I'm building something, so to speak.
Okay. So, long story short, she runs away again, decides that she's going to go back to prostitution, because at least as a prostitute, she doesn't have the
making money
of love, right? And it's like, I know what this is, right? It's not like you're not just sleeping with the guy. Like she said, the wife is the lowest paid prostitute because you're not getting paid anything. It's kind of like the way she rationalizes it. She meets this one guy who decides that he's going to be her pimp, even though she doesn't need a pimp. But he's like, I'm your pimp. Every woman has a pimp, and sort of beats her into submission.
Mm-hmm.
And as he does that, one day she realizes, I don't have to take this. So she murders him. And when she kills him, she runs off. That same night, she meets a guy who is an Arab prince. And he's like, I want to marry you. And she's like, I don't want to get married. He's like, all right, then let's sleep together. I'll pay you however much you want. Long story short, she ends up telling him in defiance that she killed a guy. And that if he pisses her off, she'll kill him too. Like, she realizes she's no longer afraid.
Oh boy.
And then the guy sort of calls the police. And this is like, there's a lot more devolution to this element of the story. But that's how she ends up in court, and condemned to die. So that's the story. It's not a book that you read for its flowery language and like a rococo style or whatever.
All those experiences she had, I am trying to think, because there are so many similarities in these stories. I think the author was trying to really use our story to encapsulate most of the things that women face in Africa.
I think that's a great view. Yeah.
Right. So the problem.
I mean, Africa, everywhere in the world, right? Like it's.
Yeah. So
it's a really good view.
The problem with her dad, right? I think her dad was violent or something, right?
He was violent, but I think his biggest problem. That sounds crazy to say that there's something worse than violence.
But what was his biggest?
He did nothing. He literally did nothing. So the wives, you sort of like toiled.
So that's negligence.
They made the food, right? And then, they had this lack of food or very little food, and the father would eat first. And whatever was left was what the children and the wives would eat, which for somebody who wants to be heralded as a provider is an insane order of events, right? Like, you can't be the provider of the family and then not provide, but then also eat first of whatever has been provided, right? And she was sent off to her uncle, actually, before she got married, um, who was like a well-respected sheikh and like an imam, um, who molested her. And it's very interesting the way the book writes about like sexual harassment, because they
Yeah.
almost write it, Nawal El Saadawi, and mind you, this is translated text, right? It was originally written in Arabic,
In Arabic.
and this is the English translation. So I'm sure some things fall through the cracks. Even though translators are very, very skilled in trying to not make that happen, I just feel you can't. It's very hard to translate some of these things, but it's
Yeah,
written
directly to
almost
English without losing
exactly.
something.
Sometimes English lacks the
Yeah.
robustness of the way the
Yeah.
original text was written. But she talks about, it's written in a very almost biblical way, like, and then he touched my thigh, and then beyond my thigh. You know what I mean? And it's sort of like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the story. So it's almost like even in the retelling, there is the lack of. It's almost like she can't go back there. You know, I don't know if that
The
was.
writing itself was bland. It was meant to be in
Yeah,
a bland manner to make it
yeah,
seem like really dark, to show that
yeah,
dark side of it.
exactly. Sort of like what you see sometimes with some victims of sexual assault. You know, they won't be able to say what happened. It's like it almost has to be euphemistic, because going back there is too much. I don't know if that was really the intention, or if it's just, this is Egypt in the 1960s. You don't write blatantly about sex. I don't know. Oh, excuse me, about sexual engagements, whether it's rape or consensual, or sex, which has to be consensual, or anything
Yeah.
like that.
It's possible.
It's possible.
It's actually really possible. So, like, as you mentioned the father, maybe I'll point out negligence. Then she moved to her uncle and was raped. She experienced rape. Then got cheated on by a guy that thought that would give her the love she so craved for. I don't know if she craves for it, but like seemed like he was different from every other man she had dealt with. Then she ventured into prostitution and was violated by the pimp, right? So that's violence and also being used as a sex object, prostitution, right? And then the last one was betrayal. So that each of these things, many women, a lot of women have expressed at least one of all these things. So I think like what she did, and if this is what she was trying to do, this is superb writing. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no,
Like
it.
try to bring all these elements of
You've done
different
some
things,
serious
vices.
analysis over there.
Yeah. If this was our intention, this is superb writing.
And there's some really fascinating quotes, or that I love from this book. One big one is, all the men I did get to know, every single one of them, has filled me with but one desire: to lift my hand and bring it smashing down on his face. which which is just the and at the start of the book, that quote is there. And then she
Yeah.
talks about how she's like, but because I am a woman, I could never. I'm too afraid. I don't have the capacity to, more or less. But then at the end of the book, the quote sort of reappears again. But she's killed this guy, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can do literally anything I want to do, because I'm no longer afraid to die, and I'm no longer afraid to
Yeah.
live." Like, she's just like, I am truly free at this point, which, of course, she's saying this in jail, right? So it depends on one's definition of freedom.
Yeah.
But it's a very it's a sort of book that when you read it, you're like, this book is not, it's not like The Alchemist. It's not giving you poetry, but
Hmm.
but when you're done and you're discussing it, you're like, oh my
What
God, there's so many
alchemist, by the
layers.
way, you should you should be specific. They're like two alchemists.
Oh, I mean the one by Paulo
Paul Coelho.
Coelho. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. If there is one other one too, that's one of my all-time favorites. So the book Poison by Paul Coelho.
Oh, I
That was why I
don't
was
mean the
like,
other
okay,
one.
maybe you have to specify. But anyways, continue. Sorry for
No, that's it's also interesting the role that women play in this book because
yeah.
um her mother is very much so. I believe her mother was sick, um, and was what she considered kind of a passive woman who let life
Mm.
happen to her. Um, and again, not, considering the context and what it all meant, um, the word passive seems a little bit harsh.
Yeah, I was about to say that given that they were in an Arabic society in the
Right,
60s, so there wasn't so
right.
much you could have done.
And she talked about how there was a while there that he just sort of felt like her mother changed. Um, like her mother used to love her and be there for her, and then as she sort of grew older, her mother became someone else. And what
Mm.
I don't know is if that's because the young girl became older and her mother knew there is a way to be a woman in this context and had to harshen her up and used to
Hmm.
beat her and sort of teach her you have to do this for your dad and wash your
Yeah.
father's legs and wash your father's garments and blah blah blah.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. or
So, oh
if
my goodness.
or if her father, or if it's a way of saying that maybe her mother was truly replaced by someone else.
Yeah.
So that's where some of the translation comes in and the full understanding of the context comes in, which I probably will never have, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of academic discourse about this, and I didn't read this book in an academic setting, so I don't know
Yeah.
what the experts say. Um, but I'm given to think it's the same mother, but she just became a woman, and women are not girls, and things change the older you get. So that then her uncle is married. Actually, her uncle gets married um, after he molests her, and the wife sort of feels like the uncle should send her away. So the wife suggests send her to university. The uncle's like, I can never send my niece to university. I'm a sheikh. I don't want her to mix with boys. So the wife is just like, you know what, marry her off to this guy. So the wife sort of again is a victim of the patriarchy and perpetrates it, and it's sort of like she's young. The guy is like in his 60s and injured and just a mess. Honestly, the guy that she gets married off
Yeah.
to. But the aunt is like, I don't care. Marry her off, like get her out of our house. So the aunt again sort of puts her into that space because the aunt probably had a lot of power there to change the course of her life, knowingly or
Yeah.
unknowingly. And then the person who introduces her to prostitution is also a woman called Sharifa. And that woman is like, you know what? We're victims of this world as women. Like women come into the world victimized by it. Um, let's take back some of our power. In that way, at least, get paid for sleeping with men.
For sleeping with men.
Almost in this way, like men are so dumb. Like you could go and sleep with your wife for free, and you want to sleep with me and pay me money. Sure, like that. That's sort of the way it's.
That was the way she felt.
Absolutely. So.
So, like, yeah, like there is all these things you laid out that one cannot deny that in the Middle East, a lot of women face this thing, right? So the thing that bothers me is like women. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. You are in that space. That's
Mhm.
some of the things happening. But I feel like women rights activism isn't getting as much traction as it should in the Middle East and in this Islamic countries. Because
I
do you know
don't know.
Ayan RC Ali?
Yeah, I am
No.
Hirsiali, yeah.
Okay, you know her.
Mm-hmm.
She had to leave her country, Somalia, because of they wanted to marry her off to one old person, and then she suffered from this thing, genital mutilation. In this day and age, do you understand? And she still goes around to talk against all those things. And I don't know if the feminist community are doing as much as they will be, even if more still needs to be done in the West. A lot has been done in the West, so to speak. I'm not saying that it's perfect. Let's move to somewhere that you guys will be needed, where your input will be much, very much appreciated. All right. Because I don't see any of this, the activism in Middle East, and many of all these things. You said?
I have to disagree.
Okay.
I do take
Okay.
your point. I understand, but a lot of work is being done in the Middle East. There's
Okay.
actually a big drive in Saudi to free one of the most well-known activists who was fighting for women to have the right to
drive.
drive,
Okay.
amongst other things. And I forget her name. I think her name is Leila Laudi. But she's basically she's one of many, of hundreds, right? So I think in the Middle East, with Middle Eastern, depending on the country, female activists and male activists, there is a lot being done to sort of say, how can we ensure that we are not using religion or anything else as a cheap excuse to keep women under the thumbs of men?
Because I see many of all these. So why I say this? Because my sense is many of these people are shying away from these things so that they won't be called tagged Islamophobes. You get. So like always do, whenever you ask them questions like that, they always find ways to dodge those kind of questions. Like, why can't you guys? These are the people that really need this ideology. They are the ones that need this the most. So
I think for the very basic things, it can be agreed, and it's always been agreed that, for example, FGM, which is not only an issue in Muslim countries, is an issue it used to be an issue in Nigeria, right? FGM,
it's still an issue in Nigeria, though. Quite
absolutely, but relative to, like, even in Igbo society, a few decades ago was rampant, whereas now you would likely be met with a lot of disgust, right? If you propose doing that, where now we see in countries like Egypt has outlawed it, at least on the federal sort of legal level. Sudan recently outlawed it in 2020. So I don't think anybody would shy away from FGM, women having the right to drive in a country like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, or women not being beaten. You don't have the liberty to beat your wife. You don't have the liberty to beat your daughter. Stuff like that. I think that's very that's stuff that anybody can say in any place in the world should not be happening, right? I think where what you're saying around people maybe being concerned of being accused of something if they propose it, I think it's not so much that as it is the awareness. If you're not in the context, and this is true for any kind of development work, if you're not in the context and you're not as privy to it, you probably don't want to be the forefront of it, at the forefront, or you don't want to be the banner man of the cause, right? Or the banner woman of the cause. So I can't ride on my white horse into into Saudi Arabia and say XYZ is all the things that you must not do, right? regarding women's rights. One, because I'm probably not the best person to do it.
Yeah.
Two, because there's people there that have been doing it for decades, people that have lost their lives and liberty, around those things.
What's it called? Still goes around with bodyguards. She's in the West.
Right.
She still goes around the bodyguard,
right,
but she gets
right,
every other day.
Yeah. And
That's
I
how
read
bad it
Ayan's
is.
book, Infidel, right? That's the name of her book.
Yeah.
I read it a long time ago, like when it first came out. Probably it's been 10 years now. But if I recall correctly, though, her book is a little bit beyond, and I think there's a fatwa issued on her. There's a lot of ridiculousness going on there, so I'm not trying to
She
cheapen that.
renounced her religion and
Her religion. So I think what's going on with her is a little bit beyond, gender equality, gender parity, gender rights within the Muslim world, right? I think there's more of a political element around.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but
hers,
everything,
right? Which I definitely condemn, but I think it's a bit of a paradigm shift when we talk about Ayan Hirsi Ali, like the person, and gender rights in the Middle East in general, which I don't feel as equipped to talk about, right? Because the closest I come to it is like North Africa when I cover Empower 46.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand what you're raising. I just don't think, somebody who's doing gender work here or in South Africa or in southern Nigeria, for example, can be expected to just as swiftly or as easily say, all right, and let me put down all the stuff and move over to Oman or to Abu Dhabi and take it up, because it's just not the same. Like if you're doing gender work in Enugu, for example, you probably can't translate that policy for policy in Kano. It just won't hold. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I think we've covered quite a lot. I think
I'm like, I could go to bed right now.
I'll give it a try. I'll read the book and tell you what I think when I'm done.
Yeah.
So let's move to the second. I think that's Chimamanda's
Ijeawele. Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions. It took me a while to read this book, actually. I I'd seen a lot of it, but it took me a while to buy my copy from like Barnes and Noble and be like, all right, this is going into my library. Let me see the rest of the 15, the full 15 suggestions.
Yeah. Is there a bigger version?
No,
okay,
no, it's like a chapbook.
Okay,
let me rephrase that. Not as far as I know.
Okay.
Let me not say no with my full chest. But it's a really interesting idea in general.
Yeah.
I actually think the conception of the book, it reminds me a lot about. Have you read or heard about The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir?
I've heard of it. Because I kind of like Simone de Beauvoir.
You kind of like. You haven't made up your mind.
I kind of like her, but I just feel like some of our theories are a bit overblown. I really admire her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's like one of the very few ones in the 20th century. Like I actually few feminists in 20th century that I actually respect.
Oh, that is.
Yeah.
I don't like that sentence, but I'm going to move on.
No, continue. You're talking about Simone de Beauvoir.
Yeah, so she has an abridged version of. There is an abridged version of The Second Sex that sort of compiles a lot of the main ideas from the actual book, and Ijeawele really reminds me of
that. Okay.
Of that, yeah, just in terms of the way the ideas are conceptualized.
Yeah.
And The Second Sex is not advice or it's manifesto like.
Yeah.
It's kind of just sort of saying what it is, and it's very interesting because Simone de Beauvoir opens up by saying, writing on the subject of matter is very irritating. The subject of women is very irritating.
Yeah.
Most of all to women, because, it's like the female condition is just a very annoying condition to live, much less have to write about upon living it. A Feminist Manifesto is a very enjoyable, sort of quick, it's like, yeah, I enjoyed it. I think my favorite one, I don't know if it's my favorite one, but the one I like a lot, is 13th Suggestion, where she talks about romance. And this is within the confines of
romance
a
will happen,
heterosexual...
so be on board.
Again, within the confines of a heterosexual relationship.
Yeah.
But I like the sentence that says, teach her that to love is not only to give, but also to take. This is important because we give girls subtle cues about their lives. We teach girls that a large component of their ability to love is their ability to sacrifice themselves.
Yeah.
We do not teach this to boys. Teach her that to love, she must give of herself emotionally, but she must also expect to be given. And I feel like what I spent my entire life telling all my friends was put into text.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you, God. I've been saying this forever. I think, especially in Nigerian society, it's really across the board, honestly, but especially there's this narrative that the kind of romantic love a woman is worthy of is one that emerges after she has given so much of herself that she almost has nothing left. And I just can't abide by that. Like, I can't accept it. I never have been able to. It just has always looked so foolish to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea as well that love is to give but also to take, I think we accept it societally in all other relationships except romantic ones on the woman's side. There is something about taking, accepting the love you're given wholly, that I think is then ascribed as being a taker, which is bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And we don't encourage women to do it. And as somebody, it's so funny. I describe myself as a taker.
But when you mean take, what do you mean in this context? What do you mean?
I mean, if you do something for me,
Yeah,
I will accept it. I don't feel the need for you to justify it. I don't feel the need to reciprocate immediately.
Yeah.
I don't feel the need to perform love. I'm a taker.
I think,
you give me something, I'm gonna take it. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean.
Like,
so I saw, this is just reminded me of something. I saw something on Twitter the other day, right? So there was this video of this guy buying his babe's birthday. So he bought her the latest MacBook, bought her the latest iPhone, and now gave her a huge amount of money, cash, right? So someone now,
good for her.
Yeah. So someone now replied, a girl now replied on that, like, that night, I'm going to suck him till he dies.
See, like,
Do you
what
understand?
is that?
So people were wondering, like, why do you need to do that? She was like, well, I don't know. I just feel like if the guy does that to me, I have to give my best.
Exactly. There is this idea of, like,
yeah, I get what you mean.
And I mean, like, if you're in a loving relationship, do whatever you want, right? But, like, it's this idea of, like, the minute we accept something, it's like, what am I giving in return? You know, and a lot of the times men do reiterate that or reinforce that, like, if you like go to a restaurant, you go to a bar, you know, a guy buys you a drink, and then there is this idea that now you are his property. Like, sir, are you all right?
Yeah.
So I think there is this idea, but especially in love, in actual relationships, like, leave aside people you meet around and you're just like hanging out. In actual relationships, take. Like, my message to women is to take, and you are not defined by this relationship. There's more, way more beyond beyond this. I just loved that suggestion because especially for Nigerian women, especially because it's
I
so
think in terms
reinforced
of like
so early in life.
female empowerment, women empowerment, and all these things, we have in Africa, Nigeria especially, we have a long way to go. As much as I enjoyed the book, right? There's this style to her books like that is it seems personal to me, personal in the sense that when I'm reading her book, because the only other book I've read apart from this is what's it called? Half of a Yellow Sun, right?
Okay.
The way she writes, when I because the way I read is when I'm reading, I kind of like read out loud in my head using someone else's voice, right? She sounds like one of my friends. The way she writes sounds like one of my
Okay.
friends. Like she was the
That's
second
good or bad.
the second what's it called? The second guest I had on the podcast, the one that talked about it, Susan. Susan, you're listening to this. So when I read
Right.
Chimamanda's book, like the way she writes, the way she just infuses all these, like just put small Igbo, put small, do you understand? Like it can seem serious and she now put small joke, like and just reminds me of the way she talks. That's why I find her books like seemingly enjoyable, right? I aside that, there were some very few things I noticed that I don't totally agree with. She mentioned stuff about social conditioning a lot, which I agree to. But I see this happening frequently where people just ascribe every sexual difference or psychological difference between men and women as just socially constructed. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's too simplistic, right? It's too easy an analysis to just say whatever it is social engineering. There's something deeper than that, right? I feel like it's not just and there's this dichotomy of nature versus nurture. I don't see it as nature versus nurture. I see it as nature and nurture, right? Nature
Okay.
has a very huge part to play. Nurture also has a very huge part to play. But regardless, given that benefit of doubt, the what's it called? The book is a short book, so she couldn't have really expatiated on all those things. So I want to believe that if at all I have
Give
a
me an
conversation with her.
example of what you mean to help me fully
Okay.
wrap my head around
Um,
your argument. So is there like an
let me see
idea
if I
or a
can remember.
situation?
Yeah, the one about toys.
Okay.
The one about
Yep.
toys. Like she hates
Mm-hmm.
the fact that what's it called? That there are boys' toys and there are girls' toys, right? And she sees that
Mm-hmm.
all of that was based on social engineering. And she also mentioned
Mm-hmm.
something like there are people that will mention that will people that would say, or she mentioned evolutionary biology. So there are some evolutionary biologists that would say that women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things, all right? But
Mm-hmm.
it isn't, she just, that was like an axiomatic statement. She just made that statement without anything backing. Because
Mm-hmm.
researches and studies have gone, like empirical studies have been done, and research has shown that, nature has a part to play in children picking their toys. All right, it's
Mm-hmm.
not solely nature, right? Social construction also has a part to play too. Also, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the things I picked. Like, no, you can't just say boys pick these toys because they are conditioned to pick that kind of toy. You get?
Mm-hmm.
So that was the part I didn't agree with. And then if I can think
Hmm.
of something else, okay, yes, this one is aside the what's it called? Aside the evolutionary biological aspect of this. Said never speak of marriage as an achievement. I do not agree. I feel like the problem here that she was trying to state there was that women see it more of an achievement than men do, right? So we cannot address the
Mm-hmm.
fact that why do men not see marriage as an achievement? Because I think fundamentally marriage is both spiritually and physically it's an achievement. And I feel like women should see it as an achievement as well as men too. And
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I was thinking this is just my sense, but I'm not saying that this is empirical. Like this has been studied, right? I was just trying to think outside the box. Like why is it like that? Why do men not take marriage as serious as women do? And the thing that came to my head was the biological clock of women compared to men, right? The brutal fact is that women get to a certain age where they can't do certain things again reproductively,
Mm-hmm.
right? So there is
Mm-hmm.
this pressure on them to want to get their life in order, want to do everything chop chop, and find someone they can settle with. All right. So
I
that
mean,
that
you don't need to get married to have a baby, though.
yeah, you don't need to marry. You don't need to marry to get a baby. But the thing is, culturally, right, from time past, the only institution where getting babies, just until recently, like about a couple of centuries ago, where not even a couple of centuries ago, about a century ago, where there was this sexual freedom and all that, yeah. But regardless, cross culturally and historically, the major institution through which you can get children is the institution of marriage. But I feel like the biological clock, the biological countdown that is against women puts that pressure on them to marry in order to have kids. You get. And men, on the other hand, even if they're 80, men can still reproduce at the age of 80. So there is this pressure is not on them to get married. I feel like that is why women nowadays, not nowadays, women always see marriage as an achievement. Like, yeah, I beat my biological clock and I have kids. And the moment they have kids, they're not heavily invested in those kids. And that's another story. But that's what I feel. That's my sense.
Okay, I take your point. I think if I were to address those two things, starting from the marriage element,
Yeah.
um, well, based on men's biological clock or that whole
Yeah.
subject, what tends to happen? I actually saw this chart the other day by um I hate that I know these things and then I forget who to attribute them to because I love to give credit where it's due, but
Because
she's
you
a
know
sort
too
of a
many things now. That's
and my brain is like delete, delete, delete,
yeah.
delete. It's her name is like I want to say her name is Mona and she's like a data
Okay.
person on
Okay.
Instagram and she does these really great charts
Okay.
in a really engaging way
Yeah.
and I regret that I don't recall her name, but hopefully we can put like in the show
Maybe
notes or
she
something.
no go vex.
Like she's not like angry at me for,
She no go
for not remembering. But she had this chart that was talking about the reason why men are able to quote unquote not have a biological ticker on their sperm, I suppose, is because when they reproduce at these really old ages, they're doing it with younger women. So their sperm is of lower quality, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening is sort of the younger woman's egg is holding the whole show together,
Yeah.
right? So if people were, let's say there was, I don't know, a cultural mandate to only marry people your age or older, for example, then men will have the same biological pressures, right?
No, no. I think that's not. They will have the same biological pressure because
Mhm.
the women are not like they've passed that
Right.
biological clock, right?
We are saying the same thing though, because the only way this works for men, I mean, you can't have a baby by yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the baby part, the only way it works for men is because they are reproducing with younger women, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not, this if you put the sperm in a petri dish, it's not going to develop into a baby, right? So
But
I'm
why I
just
said
trying
why I
to.
said it's not the same. Sorry, why I said it's not the same is because if you pick a younger man to mate with an older
Mhm,
woman, you won't get the same result as
mhm.
if you get an older
That is a fair statement to
and
make.
a
But I
younger.
do think that when we translate that over to marriage, for example,
Yeah.
what I understand that Chimamanda is trying to say, especially for women, again speaking as a woman in this context that, even our wedding industry alone is billions of naira,
Yeah.
right? Marketed largely towards women. I mean, and that's not inherently a bad thing, but I think that right from childhood in our culture and many others, most others, if not probably all others, to be honest,
Yeah.
is we are almost conditioned to audition for marriage. So at 14, 15, 16, there is a lot of language, and this didn't happen personally in my home, right? But I went to boarding school,
Yeah.
for example, right? A lot of the language is, will you do this in your husband's house? A lot of the language is, which assumes that the house will be my husband's and not ours or mine, right? A lot of the language is centered around preparing for men. What that does is says, well, one, it inherently tells you you're of lower value, because if you were of the same value, you would not be performing for someone else to pick you, right? What that tells you as well is you're not thinking of marriage as something you're coming into on equal footing. You're not thinking of marriage as something you're coming into as a partnership. You're thinking of marriage as a selection. And if you go to a store and you select something, you own it, right? It's yours. It's not, your t-shirt is not going to tell you, excuse me, excuse me, ask me before you iron me. You know what I mean? Like there's a different way it's marketed. It's not even marketed. There's a different way it's pushed upon women. So when she says don't consider, now I do think if you are lucky enough to find yourself in a loving, happy, preferably equal relationship, you've done something that you can personally consider an achievement, even though a lot of how you marry somebody, it's not a lot of hard work. Well, for one, meeting somebody is based on providence, right? One could say the same for a lot of other things in life, to be fair, but when you think about the number of factors that sort of have to click into place, it's a lot less so. Now, if one were to say, oh, I'll just meet a guy, we get married, we go to Las Vegas, sign a piece of paper, now we're married. That's also you've not really done anything. So I think what she's trying to say in that aspect is a lot of women, no matter how successful they are, if they're unmarried in our culture and many others, they are not as successful in a way that doesn't translate over to men.
Okay.
So if you think about, even in the West,
through that context, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, everything around this, because it's quite, it's the point of feminism, right, is having an equal relationship to the world, to opportunities, to events as men do. So the way we would look at it is through the lens of how are men, at least the way I would define it, right? How are men experiencing the world? And we want to experience the world in the same way.
So can I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. You mentioned what's it called? That women literally audition for marriage. And to a degree, yes, I agree. But the thing is, and you said it makes it seem like a selection. The thing is, and it's a brutal truth, is marriage has always been a case of selection from time past. It has always been like that. I don't mean just selecting the woman, also selecting the man. So the men also audition. You see this not just in men, you see it in other animals. You see it like,
but it's not
auditioning
it's not the same
picked as a mate.
No, like it's like for women.
Yeah.
For men, here's what happens. A lot of the time, you are sort of allowed to conduct your life. And then when you're 32, 33, your mother wants a grandkid, then she sort of starts pestering you a little bit. You go find somebody to marry. And then you go into the field and you look around. And this is in societies where marriages aren't arranged, for example, or anything like that. So let's assume, you live in Lagos. Standard, like, okay, go marry kind of thing. When you're 16 and if you were in the kitchen, for example, let's even start from there, and you burn a pot of rice, the language is not, how anybody marry you, this guy, what's wrong with you? Do you see what I'm saying?
But
The language for women
in reverse, like for men, there are certain things you do that your father will scold you. Is this how you would behave if you have your home? Such as you can't repair something, you can't change the tires. I see that a lot. It happens a lot. Right? You can't repair the tires and be like,
but
this is
that's
when you're
that's
married.
relative
Are you going
to
to call someone
that's relative to the real world though. Like, okay, go change a tire. Learn how to change a tire.
or you cannot
That's
kill
relative
chicken?
to
You'll be
real
like, you're a
world.
man. You
I
cannot.
don't even.
So I'm just saying that
I'm not even sure.
I'm trying to
I'm
balance
convinced.
it. It's not just.
No, well, I think you're trying to balance it, but it can't be balanced. That's why we need feminism, because you're not doing it relative to another human being. And even now, in this day and age, I would be hard pressed to believe that if you can't fix a wire,
Yeah.
somebody wouldn't think you wouldn't just call an electrician. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's I understand the urge to want to balance it. What I'm offering is that it can't be. That's why it's not. Like it's you're not performing for another human being.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you, as in for a woman, it's like, for a lot of women, what we're talking about is like, oh, you're constantly it's sacrificial, right? The same thing I was talking about at the beginning, when we started talking about the manifesto, is if you can't fix a tire, or if you can't repair something, which again I think is really not that deep, but if you can't do those things, you also can't do them for yourself. You yourself, the person.
Yeah.
Right? As a woman, if you're somebody who speaks out of turn, or what people consider out of turn, or you're loud, or you laugh too much, or you laugh too little, or you smile too much, or you smile too little, it's still all related back to a man, right? It's not about yourself.
It was when you used that example of cooking, and I was like, no, I don't. But I get your point. I get it.
Well, I'm glad it's ready. I've one for feminism.
I get it.
One. It's been a long evening.
All right, so I don't want us to dwell
the patriarchy one at a time.
I don't want to dwell so much on because I would have really loved to talk more on it about like the differences between biological differences between men and women, but I think we spent about an hour.
I mean, the way I see it is a square and a circle are two different shapes, but they're still shapes, right? I don't know that one would say a square is inherently better than a circle. They're different. We can acknowledge that men and women are different.
Yeah.
We have different biological needs, different biological expressions. At the end of the day,
and those biological differences express themselves in, like, for example, the work domain. Like there are some.
So if we go back to the toys for a second, what she's trying to say there, and I think what you can probably agree with, is that I'm not saying that boys may not grow up wanting a truck or whatever, even though there are a lot of boys. I'll tell you, in my family, right, there's a family member who is a guy who liked, when I remember when he was growing up, he liked dolls. Like he just had a very good fashion eye. So he liked to dress the dolls. And for some older members of our family, or even like people, family friends or whatever, would see him playing with a doll. But my family is kind of quite relaxed, quite liberal. And it was, he wanted a doll, they bought him a doll. Like, it's not a big deal. And they were like, some people were spazzing. Why are you letting this boy play with a doll? Don't you know what this means? Blah, 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 blah. And whatever it meant or didn't mean, which we don't care about, but whatever it meant or didn't mean, what you're saying is that he's a 4-year-old, he's a 5-year-old. He likes when he buttons the doll's top and now the doll is wearing a cardigan and a skirt. That's interesting to anyone. But you beat that out of boys and beat it into girls. You can't tell me that's nature. Because I can tell you for sure there's a 5-year-old, or a once 5-year-old in my family who was a boy who liked dolls. And now is a man who likes other things. But it didn't matter. Right? Or if there is a girl who, like, I even remember, being younger, and you'd want to participate in certain things. And again, this goes beyond the home, right? Because I wasn't facing this at home. but there's a lot more places of socialization than home. I remember in primary school, if you want to sort of get in the fray and like play football with the boys, it's nothing. I'm 7. I'm not Messi. I don't think I'm going to score a screamer. Like, I just want to play, right? And I remember like one of the like, I want to say it was like a CRK teacher or something, but she was like, hey, come out of there. Like, don't do that. How can you be kicking a ball? Like, you're a girl, go and sit down and talk with the other girls. It's like, and I love talking to girls, and I'm very much a girl's girl, but I wanted to play the ball.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can't now. So now, 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, I don't want to watch football or anything like that. And I don't think that was like that one experience or whatever. But then you tell me that the reason I don't want to do all that is inherently because I'm a girl. That can't be true. It just can't be true. I can't be convinced of it. So then somebody says,
No,
that's
the finding, the studies I said like about the toy thing was on average. They didn't say like every boy or every girl, because they did it cross culturally, like, and they ranked it from the most egalitarian societies to the least egalitarian societies. So the thing is, if it is a social construct, the differences in the preferences of toys between boys and girls in an egalitarian society should be as low as possible, right? While in
But even the most egalitarian societies are still not
yes,
quite there as far as
yes,
gender. Now, I would
yes,
say
but
I
at least
haven't
it's
seen the
better.
study.
It's better than places like Bangladesh or Nigeria or Somalia, right? So like they made those differences. I know that those egalitarian societies they're not utopia, they're not there yet, but at
Right.
least they are the
Right.
best indices we have, right? So
Yeah.
when they did that, they saw that this thing was the same cross culturally. That's preference, like males were leaned towards male kind of toys and females, and they did that countless times, and it was still the same thing. So fair enough, as you said.
I don't know the study. I
Yeah,
haven't
I will
seen
send
it,
it
but
to
I will
you.
say
I'll
this.
send you. I'll send
Oh,
you
please do.
the
I will
what's it
say
called?
this.
What's the name? I don't know. It was a woman that did it. I will send it to you. I'll send it to you. Just
Still, I'd like to see it. I feel like machismo is cross cultural. I feel like what it means to be,
yeah,
and I'm putting up air quotes, a man is cross cultural. So if you're asking a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, they've gotten that has already been imbibed, because that comes. Some people won't even. They would have a male child and a male infant, somebody whose eye color spectrum is not developed enough to know the difference between pink and blue,
yeah,
and will not dress that child in pink.
yeah.
It starts really, really, really early, and it's very insidious. So I'm just hard pressed to be swayed by it at this point, but I also haven't seen
I've
it,
said
so
the name
I don't
is
know.
Sex Differences in Children's Toy Preferences: A Systematic Review, Meta Regression, and Meta Analysis. Um,
I'd love to see
yeah,
it. When you send it through, I'll have a
I'll
look.
send it to you.
It
And
sounds
it has
interesting
lots of
enough.
mathematics in it, like statistics and all those bullshit.
Numbers can be made.
Yeah.
I'm just message. I don't believe the numbers.
All right, no problem. Let's move to the next one.
Okay.
The last book.
The last book. Yep. It is The Shadow of Imana, which is written by Veronique Tadjo. So the book was originally written in French,
Yeah.
which I think is close enough for a very robust translation compared to Arabic, for example.
Yeah.
And is written by an African author in convert Rwanda. So what happened? I think that setting the stage. I think so. I was reading this on an academic paper written about the book, and it's basically how this all came about. So in 1998, I think there was some funding from the French Foundation for 9 African writers, to travel to Rwanda and kind of write about what they see relative to the impact of the genocide, and basically, reconciliation,
Yeah.
repair, all that good stuff. So, Veronique's book really is a very haunting book. Like there's so the way it's kind of like little. I don't know if the word is like, the word is not excerpt. It's like short stories about different specific sites. So there will be like a site. She would say like, oh, this church, genocide, 50,000 people killed.
Yeah.
Like, so it like she would give like little sites and maybe say like house or whatever road, family home,
Yeah.
3 people dead, non-yaki 6 years old, 4 years old, like stuff like that.
Mhm.
It kind of varies. And I find the Rwandan genocide hard to read about, write about, talk about.
You've written
I don't
about
know
it.
why. Yeah, so within Empower 46, last year, 2019, was Kwibuka 25, which is, Kwibuka is, I believe it means remember in Rwanda. And it was the 25th memorial of the genocide. And so I wrote a little like summation,
Yeah.
put together some links and videos about it, and how it's related to women, the women that a lot of rape happened, of course, as a tool of war.
Yeah.
It is used as a tool of war. It should not be. It is against a lot of the conventions that govern war, but who listens to those? It includes women that were perpetrators, women who killed, women who ordered killings. So I just, it's, the whole affair is quite morbid. But this book in particular is really interesting because I think it, from a writer's perspective, it comes into writing about destruction in a very poetic but impactful way. It doesn't trade poetry for impact, which can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
And it's very, very visceral. Very, very visceral. So if you are emotional or if you are not prepared, I wouldn't go near it. I really wouldn't. But I think if you want a different way to look at such a topic,
Yeah.
it's kind of the best book for that. Yeah. And she meets with a few survivors, writes about talking to them, and there's kind of a supernatural element to it, where she just writes a little bit about like I don't know if the word is like a healer or like just there's a bit of supernatural, the world beyond ours that is written into the book as well. But it's a fascinating book. I know I keep bringing up quotes.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
There's very
Quote equal
specific
generator.
things. There's just very specific things that stick in my mind when I read a book. I'm like the worst person to borrow a book from because they're like underlined and stuff. I mark up my books even when they're
Remind me
fiction.
never to borrow your book.
Yeah, like I think it's also like my insurance policy. You're gonna give me that book back because you hate it. You hate the fact that there's but she writes, pain comes in waves, but when those waves threaten to engulf you, remember that you are the masters of your emotions, which I think is a beautiful way to think about, well, on a personal level about pain, but I think on a national level, right? Because if you look at what Rwanda's been through and how the only way through was reconciliation, it just had to be. And you think about the victims, and how the pain must come back up, if not every day, at least every year, at memorial season. And the concept of when those waves threaten to engulf you, maybe to think about revenge or anything like that, you have to be the master of your own emotions. I just, it, I read that line and I almost sent her fan mail. I was like, where can I email you? You're like my therapist. You're like free therapy over here. Magnificent book, magnificent writer, magnificent book. Very challenging topic to write about, and a very usually I think that recently after such a thing,
Yeah.
you sometimes find that non-academic books written about it maybe don't hold up, at least in terms of political correctness.
Yeah.
Many years later, and I believe this one has. It's
And I
it's
saw
beautiful.
I saw somewhere where they said that it's even better. It's even a better book to read compared to like books, accounts on the genocide written by white people. Because what they do is
I can accept that
they'll
wholeheartedly.
they
Yes.
would have to get people to give them accounts and have an interpreter or something. But this is through the eye of a fellow African and experience that sees all these things and puts them in pen and all that, and asking people that have really experienced this thing firsthand and get to their accounts. But yesterday, I was trying to check out why the Rwandan genocide happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so like I was trying to think like what can motivate people to want to eliminate, wipe off. Like I was thinking like deep down to like the biological because sorry, I'm a science guy. So always look through that lens, right?
I was like, he has come
So
again with the biological.
what is it in our brains that can at what point do because I talked with Dami in my episode with him, we talked about Hitler and the
Yes, I
genocide
remember that
against
episode. Great episode, by the way.
thank you, against the Jews. And what is it in the human brain that triggers us to want to, or at what point, what are the parameters of life do we need to
Yeah.
have to get to that point where killing now seems like a normal thing? Killing now seems like the
Yeah.
right thing and the only thing to do. Not just killing, like exterminating a whole race. And genocide happens in different places, right? At certain times. Like what is it exactly that drives a human mind to want to do that? Just kept me thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, I don't have the answer to that, but I think that it's, what's the thing, that Ron said, the banality of evil, right?
Yeah.
It's, if you, I think humans, are, I mean, this is not a ground shattering statement I'm about to make. We're extremely emotional beings.
Yeah.
I realized I started the sentence like I was going to say something profound.
Yeah, exactly. I was like,
It's like a very common statement that followed. But I say that to say that it's, in the Rwandan context, right? There was a lot of the tribal, a very difficult tribal history
yeah.
between, I guess the Tutsis and the Hutus and even like the Twa. So there is definitely a lot of pre-colonial and then obviously worsened by colonialism, which had a grave way of worsening everything it met. And then, the assassination of what's his name?
He's one very long name. Maria something. Abiarina Mana or something.
And that sort of kicked off things. Isn't that the assassination of men?
Like the First World War. I think that that assassination they had been like on the knife edge. They've been living on the knife edge. So the assassination was just an excuse to.
It was an excuse.
Yeah, something that I think there was even a mini genocide before then, where it was the reverse. the Tutsis. I think the
Yes.
Tutsis killed the Hutus, something like that. So
I think I mean it's kind of the same thing that happened in the Civil War, right? There was after the coup, it led to the pogroms, and then the pogroms led to the war.
yeah,
Anyway, I say all that to say there's a lot of rhetoric, and the power of words is immense. I mean, it's going on in the US now.
yeah,
It's going on. If you can explain something away, you have a lot of power. And I think that's something that they knew, like in the ancient world, how highly regarded like orators were,
yeah,
where it was like, because most people are looking for a reason
yeah,
for anything.
yeah.
Like they're looking for a
So
reason for anything. And
I totally agree with you. But there's
yeah,
something common among those people that have been persuaded by like demagogues, right? There's something common
yeah,
about them, and I think the common thing is disenfranchisement. Like they are always different, disenfranchised. Those set of
yeah.
people,
They're not vested in the
E-
country that would
exactly,
exist.
exactly.
But I,
So
I
they
think
just
that
have
that,
one.
that sounds true until you consider the fact that I suppose not on your ground, right? So
Yeah,
a lot of wealthy people and countries fund wars, if we consider what's going on in Yemen,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But it's just not happening on your soil. So
yeah.
it's not
No, no.
disenfranchised people might do your
I meant
fighting.
in the no. I didn't mean like war, like in the context of war itself. People go to war
Yeah,
for very stupid reasons. People have
yeah.
gone to wars because of a woman, because of women. So um,
I mean, and because of men.
and because of men. So so
This is
for
clarify some
for
things.
different reasons. So I meant in the
Yeah,
context
yeah,
of genocide itself, like killing people
yeah.
within the borders of your society, of your country, killing
Right,
people around you, people that used to be your
right.
brother, used to be your neighbor. Then all of a sudden that
Yeah.
just disappears and you decide to kill them. So I think that
There's a very interesting video on BBC,
okay.
and it's I'm going to encourage everybody to go to empower46.org and check it out. It's on one of the old newsletters.
Yeah.
Plug myself there, but it's
What episode or what? How do
it's
I
called, it's the
know the
issue
particular one?
titled, I think it's the issue titled Many Ways to Remember. And it would be from April 2019, because I believe Kubuka falls in April.
All right, guys,
Kubuka definitely falls in
guys,
April, I
check.
think.
What's it again? No,
Empower46.org.
not that. The issue itself.
Oh, the issue, Many Ways to
Okay,
Remember.
guys, check out many ways to remember Power 46 to get this particular
But there's
BBC
this
video.
video,
Talking
and the
about.
woman is she's talking about she actually cut down her neighbor, and she's obviously now it's been 25 years, and they're talking about how she got there, right? Because
Yeah,
it's that's really the question, like, how did you arrive at this? And she talks about how on the radio everybody was saying go do this, and they were all doing it, and they were reiterating all the evils, and again I have evils in air quotes,
yeah,
excuse me. They were reiterating all the evils that the other tribes had done to them, and why it was necessary to ensure their children's survival and their grandchildren's survival and the survival of the
yeah,
country to cut people down, right? And these are people of faith. These are people of, some of them of education, but definitely you don't need an education to not kill your neighbor.
yeah,
You don't need a Western education to not do that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So she was just sort of saying she can't tell you why she did it now in retrospect, right? Because she doesn't even know that she believes that now.
Yeah.
But it's sort of I think when you also think about the mode, something that makes the genocide particularly hard for me in terms of interpreting it is this was happening with like cutlasses and machetes and
I heard they went to import cutlasses like years before then. They imported cutlasses and
right. It was very, if you were going to kill someone, doing it in this way is very jarring.
Yeah.
Right? There is a lot. It's not a gun that you can stand at the end of the hallway and you stand at the other end of the hallway, then I shoot you and you fall. Right?
Yeah.
To kill somebody with a cutlass, you have to come really close to them. There's a lot of blood that's gonna splatter on your face. Right? It's a very personal thing to do. Yeah, you don't get to do that and walk away. Right? You have to go wash yourself after that. There's a lot of do you see what I'm trying to say? It's very visceral. So what Rwanda's done, and I think when I talk about the Rwandan genocide, I don't necessarily like sit on it, because I think to do all that and kind of build a country, and I know they're facing a lot of issues still with power, right? Kagame and quite a few political prisoners and all that stuff. And I actually think Rwanda has done a good job, but I've never been to Rwanda, right? I don't know how much.
I think you should. I've not been to, but everyone keeps saying, people that have been always say, like, go to Rwanda, just check out Rwanda.
Yeah, I would like to check it out. The closest I've gone to it is Kenya, but I haven't been to Rwanda itself. It's definitely on my list for the next 2 years, provided COVID leaves us all alone.
So while you're talking, I sort of I was thinking about the question I asked, and something came to my head, which I think gives me like a little bit of understanding as to why that happened. I think there is a deep instinct in human beings to want to homogenize a society, especially when resources are very limited. Because
That's fair.
if you look back, because I remember reading, because I just remembered reading one part where they said one of the reasons that caused the tensions between those tribes was like the increase in population. I think it increased. I think it tripled or so in the space of like 30 or 40 years, and that's caused limited resources. And obviously, human beings are naturally tribalistic. So human beings are naturally tribalistic. So when the resources are limited and you know that because you immediately become paranoid about everything, the next person can come to kill you, all right, or come to steal your stuff. You would now rationalize killing the other people because you want to ensure the survival of your generation, so your generations to come, and for that your tribe itself. So there's this deep instinct of trying to erase. Because if you look at other genocides, so basically almost the same thing. In the German genocide on the Jews was the same thing. It felt like the Jews were taking all of their resources and they don't have anything. They did what they did.
I think it's truer in theory than in reality.
Yeah, obviously with so many other things too. And one of those other
it's
things
a good point.
Having a good orator or good, like for the Rwandan genocide, I also heard that there was a radio station that was also one of the major reasons that caused the tensions. Like the radio station, they were talking about all of these things. So you just have to have like a catalyst to keep inciting violence and all these things. And
I mean, when you look at, for example, in the US, the ultra right, well, what do they call them? The far right.
The ultra right, yeah.
I mean, the right at this point, but
not the right, the ultra right. It's very big.
I'll let you have it. The far right.
Yeah.
The far right is what I want to talk about, though. The language they use is language of scarcity, which is not true, right? But you're spot on, in my opinion, to say that's the easiest way to get people who are already given to such proclivities of because you already have to have that kind of mindset in a way, or have that kind of belief in a way, and then it is worsened or exacerbated by somebody telling you, here you see a country full of wealth, really full of opportunity, and somebody says, because Black people or Hispanic
your
people or whatever.
sorrows, your suffering is because of this
Yeah,
particular tribe.
it's because of these particular people. They're taking everything, the language of take,
Yeah.
everything from us. I definitely see your point there. I think there's a lot of value in that perspective. Me personally, I think there are many ways to do these sorts of things and to do them well. People have done it for centuries.
Yeah.
Right? You look at what happened in Burundi.
Yes.
You look at what happened in Armenia. It takes what the Germans did in Namibia,
Myanmar,
right? In exactly what's going on right now. So there's a lot of ways to do them. What I think is harder to do is to maintain the reality of the truth. And I think what Rwanda did was say there will be no revisionism. This is what happened.
Yeah, I respect them.
We have to face it.
I think it's even a criminal offense to
remarkable.
It's a criminal offense.
Is it? Oh.
Yeah. So to say it didn't happen, to deny it and to try to revision it is a criminal offense.
And I think they do that really well because, for example, in something Nigeria hasn't done well is talk about the
Civil War,
depth of the failure and the horror that was the Nigerian Civil War.
Yeah.
Because to me, if Nigerians really understood what happened, aside from, and half of the Yellow Sun is great, right?
Yeah.
Aside from that story, and I was surprised to learn that a lot of people didn't know a lot about the Nigerian Civil War aside from the book, which by that alone, Chimamanda has done us a great service, right? But it's like, there wouldn't be this idea, every so often, I don't know if you see this, maybe it's just the content I'm consuming, but every so often you see this, let's succeed, or Nigeria will be better off without whatever elements, without the North, without the South, without whatever. And the only way that can happen is with war, is by war.
Yeah.
But if a country that had a war so recently, right, in the grand scheme of things, our war was quite recent, right? And somebody can so loosely say, let's just go.
War.
That means you don't know what happened. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, so it's stuff like that I'm like, record keeping, accurate record keeping.
Yeah, that's the word. Accurate record.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but those who do not, what's the saying? Those who do not record the past, or those who do not know history, are doomed to repeat it. I think, the Shadow of Imana is not a very popular book. I don't know why. Oh, maybe I do know why.
You know why?
Because it's hard to read.
You know why?
But still, there's a lot of books that are very hard to read that are still popular. I don't know why you didn't find it, to be honest, or how I did find it.
I searched. But is it the hard copy you have?
I have 2 copies. I have the hard copy. I have 2 hard copies. I have one in Lagos and one here.
Okay. Maybe when you come to Lagos, you give me that one.
Yeah, no, it's definitely worth reading. It's not as popular as it should be, at least in English. I don't know if it's popular like in the French world.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think it's one of those books that does something that's very hard to do. It not only does it well, but it does it like in the most beautiful language. In the most the kind of language that stays with you at night.
Yeah.
Remarkable book. If you were to start with one book out of these 3, I would start with The Shadow of Imana.
All right.
You will spend most of your time crying. Don't say I didn't warn you.
I'm a hard guy.
But you'd learn something. Hard guy.
All right. Thank you so much. Like, we've had a very robust discussion on all these things. I think this is the longest I've done by far.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No,
it's fine. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for taking out your time to do.
You're more than welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So for everyone that listened, thank you and goodbye.